welcome to another edition of Analyst Insights. Thank you so much for watching this show. Today, again, I'm joined by my colleague Rufaro. Welcome to the show, Rufaro.
Thank you for having me, Ranga.
Thanks. So we have got a few things to just discuss quickly, developments on the local capital markets. So by way of the summaries, we are seeing that the market remains very depressed. The major indices are showing negative movement there, even in local dollar terms, with the all-share index down 9%, the top 10 and top 15 down by between 12 and 15%. And then there were some positive movements on the medium, small cap indices there, with gains between 9 and 15%. And when you're looking at the exchange rate market, you're seeing that the parallel market is generally been stable, with trades happening around just under 8,200 there, even maybe around 7,000 thereabouts. Then on the auction, the rate is now at 5,395 from about 6,326, which shows that the Zim dollar has been gaining value. In terms of the weekly trades, on the ZSE, 10.64 billion Zim dollars exchanged hands, and on the if you look on the VFEX, about 938,000 changing hands. In terms of activity, we are seeing activity actually picking up on the Victoria Falls Exchange, mostly being driven by big deals on Inscore and Simbisa. And then on the Zim dollar bourse, the ZSE, we are seeing Delta being the major traded stock there. Auction parallel market rate, we are seeing all the markets actually are coming off because of what you're seeing on the market. We'll discuss a bit more about that. And also the ZSE in sympathy is also sliding down. Then the movers and shakers for the week are as shown, with FML and BAT the major movers, and then CBZ and Mikos are the major shakers. All the movements that we've seen so far has actually come at a big cost to the market, with the likes of Delta, Econet, and pretty much everything losing value. The appreciation in the Zim dollar, and to try to put it into its proper context. And I saw a lot of some stories pointing to even prices of commodities or certain services coming down, Zinara being one of them, where the trophies in Zim dollar terms were reduced in line with the rate, and also the Zim dollar price of bread. What picture can you paint on what's happening right now?
Action. Sometimes it involves freezing accounts, sometimes it's involved freezing bank lending, sometimes it involved an adjustment in Zim dollar interest rates. They've always taken action to constrain liquidity when the rate has run quite hard. And because the currency market is opaque, so when I say opaque, I mean, in terms of the numbers like money supply, M2, M3, the official numbers, we don't actually have access to them in real time. I think the last time they were published was in March. We don't know what's happening with importers and exporters. So we, sometimes the momentum in the exchange rate movement is actually not driven by fundamentals. It's at a certain point in time, it becomes fear and greed that are driving it, and when liquidity tightens, then the rate corrects. So this is what I think we're witnessing. So both on the parallel market and in the official markets, the rate has pulled back. But have things changed fundamentally? Is this a new era for the Zim dollar, where we're going to see stability and inflation come off significantly? There is no evidence that this is what's happening. If anything, it just looks like the same pattern, where when the rate runs, it overshoots, it comes back, it's stable for a few months, and then it continues its downward descent.
Yeah, so you get the official position that there's no going back when it comes to the Zim dollar. So that's the official policy position, that the Zim dollar is going to be there. In fact, some have even gone a step forward and say post-election we might actually see the multi-currency system that we have being done away with completely in favor of the Zim dollar. And yet at the same time we are seeing the Zim dollar still coming. You know, there's this disconnect which is there, because right now we are seeing a lot of CZI actually came out and say the economy is now in hyperinflation, and then the companies are also now grappling with how to deal with hyperinflation in a situation where inflation numbers are not being announced. What do you make of all that? The first, what's coming out from CZI about us being in hyperinflation, and how the businesses are having to deal with this situation where the Zim dollar is said to be scarce, but at the same time it's hyperinflating in the accounting aspects, because I know some companies have actually delayed announcing their financial results because of that conundrum.
Yeah, look, I think it's good when you have a business body like CZI come out and express its concerns in this way. Hopefully, the powers that be are paying attention and consider the issues being raised. Look, we are in a hyperinflationary environment, and this necessitates the use of IFRS 9, which is the hyperinflation accounting standard. But it's not possible to actually put together inflation-adjusted accounts without Zim dollar inflation numbers. Okay. So I think it's an on goal in terms from a policy standpoint, because we are now making it impossible for companies to comply with global accepted accounting standards. So I don't see any good reasons why the government is not publishing inflation numbers, because to calculate the number that is actually being published, which is the blended inflation figure, you actually use the Zim dollar inflation numbers. And by not sharing the official inflation numbers, it doesn't mean that the market stops paying attention to Zim dollar inflation. All that it means is that the market then comes up with other proxies for Zim dollar inflation, whether they look at what's happening on the parallel market or they create their own baskets. And chances are the market is not as well resourced or skillful at this as ZimStats, and it's likely actually that the proxies that people then use for the official CPI inflation will actually make things look worse than they are. So if you're looking at it from the policymakers' perspective, that they are withholding Zim dollar inflation numbers because they make the economy look bad, but I actually think that they're getting the opposite outcome by withholding the numbers, because the market's numbers will actually typically be worse than the official numbers. And so I don't think that policy of withholding the Zim dollar inflation numbers is serving us well.
So yes, so clearly it's creating some problem, because in terms of International Accounting Standard number 29, if your currency is in hyperinflation, there's a certain way of reporting that you have to do to reflect that. And the basis of that are obviously CPI numbers or some proxy for inflation. So with what we have with the blended rate, which is actually being skewed towards the USD, given the level of transacting in the economy, it's actually making it very, very difficult for these businesses to report meaningful IS, International Accounting Standard adjusted numbers. And just going on to the market, let's just talk about the increasing activity on the Victoria Falls Exchange. The activity, especially those trades in INSCO, 812,000. When I looked at the delta number at 1.6 billion, it's translating to just above 220,000. So just INSCO alone in those trades in the past week, just above 800,000 Is that a sign that maybe this VFX is beginning to pick up in terms of activity, or is something once off? What's your analysis of what you're seeing?
So actually, there was an important milestone this week that I don't think you covered in your preamble, which is that I think it was on Tuesday where we actually saw more volume in terms of value of shares, whichever rate you use. We actually saw more trades on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange than the ZSE. It's unprecedented. That's the first time it's happened. And what that speaks to, in my mind, is this transition that we've been witnessing of the economy dollarizing. The last numbers from Zimstats said that 76% of our economy was USD and 24% was Zim dollar. And but in the formal markets, you know, the ZSE has dominated in terms of value of trades because most of the players in the capital markets are actually in the formal sector and constitute that 24%. But even those players are seeing more receipts in terms of investable funds in US dollars. And this is now translating to the activity that we're seeing in Inscore, in Simbisa, and the other stocks on the VFEX. So this trend, as just like what we experienced in 2009, you know, when the market was reopened in February, you know, the economy had dollarized, but there was not a lot of liquidity out there. In fact, civil servants weren't even being paid in US dollars. They were getting vouchers which allowed them to buy groceries, right? Shops, yeah. So, and if you actually review the numbers for February, March, April on the ZSE in 2009, the volumes were incredibly thin and the valuations were actually very low as well. I think we saw trades in Delta at as low as 14 cents, which is crazy today. So basically what, but if by Q4 2009, you started seeing significant volumes on the ZSE because the liquidity was there. So I think that it's a good analogy for what we're seeing happening today, where as the economy moves to more US dollars, the volume of trading on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange actually increases. And as the use of the Zim dollar declines, it also starts to affect the value of trades on the ZSE. So I think, you know, this trend is going in one direction. And, you know, recently, I think a week or two ago, Zimpla announced it's moving across to VFEX. I think that as this dollarization trend continues, we're going to see an exodus from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. And this occurrence where it was just one day, where there was more value traded on the VFEX than the ZSE, it's going to become the norm rather than the exception.
There you have it. Thanks so much, Faro. So it's good that we are seeing activity on the Victoria Falls Exchange at a time when the ZSE obviously is being affected by the liquidity problems around the Zim dollar. Is that going to be sustainable? What's going to continue driving activity on the Victoria Falls Exchange? And how does this sit versus the public policy where the Zim dollar, actually the policymakers are trying to encourage more Zim dollar activity? So these are all questions that we are asking. We don't have answers. To our viewers, if you've got answers to any of these questions, please feel free to comment, get in touch on our different platforms, and let's hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time, and bye-bye for now.